Screen prints, or serigraphs, are made by using a squeegee to force ink onto paper through a stencil that forms the image. A mesh fabric that is stretched tightly across a rigid frame supports these stencils so that they can easily form complex patterns. Stencils can be made by applying a variety of ink-blocking substances directly on the screen fabric. The screen is covered with a photoemulsion that hardens when exposed to ultraviolet light. The emulsion is poured into a long trough called a scoop coater. The scoop coater is pulled up the face of the screen to evenly distribute a thin layer of emulsion onto the stretched fabric. Once the screen has been coated, it must be placed in a dark area for 1 hour so that the emulsion is dry to the touch. If light is allowed to reach the screen during this drying period, it can harden the entire stencil area. While the screen dries, stencils are prepared and touched up for the exposure process. Stencils can be made by applying dark strokes of paint onto clear mylar film sheets. Stencils can also be generated on a computer and printed onto transparent sheets. The black areas of the stencil will block out the light when the screen is exposed and keep those areas from hardening. This is the exposure unit. It has a glass top with a bright light in the bottom. The glass is cleaned to make sure that no dirt is able to block light from reaching the screen. Once the screen dries, the stencil is placed onto the glass of the exposure unit, and the screen is placed on top of the stencil with the emulsion side down. The vacuum and the bright light are turned on. A vacuum holds the screen and stencil firmly against the glass during the exposure process. After 2 minutes, the screen is fully exposed and the light is turned off. The screen stencil is washed out with water. The emulsion on the screen has hardened in the areas that were not blocked by the black paint on the mylar stencil. However, the areas that were underneath the black paint on the stencil did not receive light and have remained soft. Those soft areas are easily washed out of the screen fabric. A squeegee that is wide enough to pass over the entire pattern is selected and checked for imperfections. The screen is wiped dry and then attached to a printing board with hinge clamps. A generous amount of ink is dabbed onto the screen in a line that matches the width of the squeegee. The ink is pulled across the stencil to fill the open areas with ink prior to the printing stroke. This is called a flood stroke and charges the screen with enough ink to pull more consistent quality prints. The screen is lowered over a clear piece of hinged plexiglass, and the squeegee is passed over the stencil again. This pushes the ink through the screen and onto the plexiglass and creates a proof of the stencil. This hinged plexiglass is used to register the placement of the paper for each of the subsequent proofs. Using the print on the hinged plexiglass as a guide, the exact position of the paper can be determined. Once the placement is exact, the screen is lowered onto the paper and the squeegee pushes the ink through the screen. The print is a success. Once the printing process is complete, the screen is wiped clean of ink and the tape is removed. A diluted bleach solution is sprayed onto the screen to dissolve the hardened emulsion. The screen is cleared of emulsion with a high-pressure sprayer and can be used again in the future.